"I'm the girl you saved 29 years ago," declared the millionaire to the poor mechanic. Marcus Thompson never imagined that an ordinary Tuesday morning would completely change the course of his life. He had been working for 25 years at the same auto repair shop in the Hope Heights neighborhood of Los Angeles, fixing old cars and serving the humble local clientele. His calloused hands knew every bolt, every strange engine noise, every secret the old cars held. That's when he heard the sound of an expensive car stopping in front of the shop. Marcus looked up from the hood of the yellow Beetle he was repairing and saw an elegant woman stepping out of a black BMW. She wore an impeccable beige blazer and shoes that cost more than 3 months of his salary. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and there was a determination in her blue eyes that made him stop what he was doing. The woman walked directly to him, completely ignoring the other employees in the shop. Her heels echoed on the concrete floor, creating a rhythm that seemed to mark the seconds before something important happened. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag dirty with grease and looked at her curiously. Clients like her didn't show up there every day. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "That's me. How can I help you?" replied Marcus, finding it strange that she knew his full name. The woman took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what was coming next. Her eyes filled with tears and she placed a hand on her chest, visibly emotional. "My name is Elizabeth Harrison," she said, pausing dramatically. "I'm the girl you saved 29 years ago." Marcus felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. The screwdriver he was holding slipped from his hands and fell to the ground with a metallic clang that echoed through the shop. The other employees stopped what they were doing and looked in their direction, sensing something important was happening. "What do you mean?" Marcus stammered, his mind racing to process what he had just heard. Elizabeth moved closer, reducing the distance between them. Marcus could smell the expensive scent of her perfume, so different from the oil and grease that were part of his daily life. "Do you remember that rainy June afternoon in 1995? asked Elizabeth, her voice now firmer. "You were 16 and were coming home from school when you found me crying on Palm Street." Marcus felt his heart race. That was a memory he had treasured like a treasure for nearly 3 decades, a memory that helped him believe there was kindness in the world, even in life's most difficult moments. "You were lost," whispered Marcus, the memories returning like waves. "Crying a lot with a cut on your arm." "Exactly," said Elizabeth, pulling up the sleeve of her blazer and showing a scar on her right arm. "This scar. You took me home, stayed with me until my mother arrived. You told me everything would be okay." Marcus looked at the scar and felt a chill run down his spine. It was exactly as he remembered, in the same place, the same size. But something didn't add up. The woman in front of him was too elegant, too well-educated. The girl he had found that day was dressed in simple, torn clothes. "I remember the girl," said Marcus, hesitating. "But there were some things different." "People change in 29 years, Marcus," interrupted Elizabeth, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Especially when they have the opportunity to grow and prosper. And that was only possible because of what you did for me that day." Daniel, the shop's most senior employee, approached curiously. He had known Marcus for 15 years and had never seen his boss so shaken. "Is everything okay over here, Marcus?" asked Daniel, looking suspiciously at Elizabeth. "Yes, it is," replied Marcus, still processing the situation. "Elizabeth, why don't we talk somewhere more private?" Elizabeth nodded, and the two headed to the small office at the back of the workshop. The space was simple, with an old wooden desk, 2 chairs, and some shelves full of automotive parts catalogues. Elizabeth looked around with an expression Marcus couldn't decipher. "Please have a seat," said Marcus, offering the less broken chair. Elizabeth sat down gracefully, crossing her legs and placing the designer handbag on her lap. Marcus remained standing, leaning against the wall, still trying to take it all in. "How did you find me after all this time?" asked Marcus. "I never stopped looking for you," replied Elizabeth, her words heavy with emotion. "That day completely changed my life. You showed me that there are still good people in the world, Marcus. It gave me the strength to overcome everything that came after." "What happened after that day?" Marcus sat in the other chair, genuinely interested. Elizabeth looked out the small office window, as if reliving distant memories. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more intimate. My birth mother abandoned me 2 weeks after that day, she said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. I went to one foster home, then another and another, but I always remembered what you told me that afternoon. What did I say? Marcus asked, trying to recall the details of the conversation. That good people always find a way to help others, even when they don't have much to offer. That kindness is the only thing that really matters in life. Marcus shook his head slowly. Those words sounded familiar, but he wasn't sure if they were exactly what he had said. Perhaps time had altered both of their memories. And how did you... Marcus gestured vaguely, indicating her expensive clothes, the imported car outside. I studied hard, worked even harder, Elizabeth replied, pride in her voice. I got a scholarship to university, graduated in business administration, started a small business that grew and grew. Today I have a business consulting firm with offices in 5 states. That's incredible, said Marcus, genuinely impressed. It must have been very difficult. It was, but whenever I thought of giving up, I remembered that 16-year-old boy who stopped his life to help a strange child. If you could be generous with nothing, I could be strong with no one. Marcus felt a mix of pride and discomfort. On one hand, it was moving to know that a small gesture of his had such a big impact on someone's life. On the other hand, there were details in the story that didn't fit perfectly with his own memories. Elizabeth, he said, hesitating, do you remember the name of the street where you found me? Palm Street, she answered without hesitation. Number 847. There was a bakery on the corner. The owner was a short man who wore thick glasses. Marcus was impressed by the precision of the details. There really had been a bakery at that location back then, and the owner matched her description exactly. Perhaps it was his own memories that were fuzzy after so much time. Why did it take you so long to look for me? Asked Marcus. Elizabeth sighed deeply as if the question brought up painful memories. I tried a few times over the years, but I never had enough information. I only knew your first name and the area where it happened. It was only recently that I managed to hire a private investigator who helped me find you. A private investigator? Marcus repeated, surprised. Yes. When you have resources, you can use them to find the people who made a difference in your life. Elizabeth smiled. I spent a small fortune, but it was worth every penny. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Marcus didn't quite know what to say. The whole situation was so surreal, he felt as if he were living a dream. All these years he had wondered what had happened to that girl. In the toughest moments of life, when he questioned whether his actions really made a difference, he remembered that day and found the strength to carry on. Marcus, said Elizabeth, leaning forward in her chair, I would like to repay your kindness. I know you have a thriving shop here, but I'm sure we can do much more. How so? Marcus asked, a bit uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I can invest in your business, help you expand, maybe open branches in other neighborhoods. I have contacts in the automotive industry. I can get you big contracts. Marcus shook his head quickly. No. Thank you, but that's not necessary. I'm already happy to know you're doing well, that you managed to build a good life for yourself. But I insist, Elizabeth said, her voice growing more intense. You saved my life, Marcus, literally. If it weren't for you that day, I don't know what would have happened to me. Elizabeth, I just did what any decent person would do. No reward is needed. It's not a reward, she said, touching his arm. It's gratitude. It's justice. You deserve good things in life, Marcus. Marcus felt a warmth rising up his neck. There was something in the intensity of Elizabeth's gaze that made him uncomfortable. It was as if she were seeing right through him, reading thoughts he didn't even know he had. I'll think about what you said, replied Marcus, trying to be polite. But for now, just getting to know you again is already a gift. Elizabeth smiled, but Marcus noticed the smile didn't seem completely sincere. There was a hardness in her eyes that contrasted with the softness of her words. Of course, she said, rising from the chair. I don't want to pressure you, but I promise I'll be back. We have a lot to talk about after all these years. Marcus walked Elizabeth to her car, watching as the other shop employees looked at her with curiosity. Daniel approached him as soon as the black BMW disappeared around the corner. "Who was that woman?" asked Daniel, wiping his hands on a rag. "She seemed important." Marcus hesitated before answering. For some reason, he didn't feel comfortable sharing the whole story. "Someone I helped a long time ago," he said, returning to the beetle he was fixing. Nothing major. But deep down, Marcus knew it was much more than that. Elizabeth had stirred memories that had been locked away for decades, and she had also brought questions he couldn't answer. Why didn't some details line up perfectly? Why did she seem to know so much about his current life? And why did he feel a knot in his stomach whenever he looked into her eyes? The rest of the day passed slowly. Marcus tried to focus on work, but his mind kept returning to the conversation with Elizabeth. Every word she had said echoed in his head, every gesture of hers replayed in his memory. There was something there he couldn't quite grasp. When he got home that night, his wife Rebecca immediately noticed something was different. They had been married for 22 years, and she knew all her husband's moods. "Did something happen today?" asked Rebecca, serving dinner at the small kitchen table. "You seem off." Marcus looked at his wife and felt a wave of affection. Rebecca was 52 years old, with greying hair she insisted on dyeing brown, and a smile that still made him fall in love every day. She worked as a cook at a public school and always came home tired, but never failed to ask about his day. "A woman showed up at the shop today," said Marcus, helping himself to rice and beans. "Said I helped her when she was a child." "Helped how?" Rebecca sat at the table, interested. Marcus told the whole story, from the moment Elizabeth arrived at the shop to the conversation in the office. Rebecca listened in silence, occasionally asking questions about specific details. "And do you believe it's really her?" asked Rebecca when Marcus finished. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "She knew details only the girl could know. The scar in the right place, the exact address, even the bakery on the corner. But there was something—" "What?" "I can't explain it. A feeling that something wasn't right." Rebecca chewed thoughtfully for a few moments. "Maybe it's just the shock," she finally said. "It must be very strange to have someone from the past show up like that, out of nowhere." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, but he wasn't convinced. "Did she say she'll come back?" "She did." "And do you want her to come back?" Marcus stopped his fork halfway to his mouth. It was a simple question, but the answer wasn't obvious to him. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Part of me wants to know more about what happened to her all these years, but another part—" "Another part what?" "Another part feels that some things should stay in the past." Rebecca nodded slowly. She knew her husband well enough to know when he was worried, even if he couldn't explain exactly why. That night Marcus had trouble sleeping. He tossed and turned in bed, replaying the conversation with Elizabeth in his mind. There were details that bothered him, small inconsistencies he couldn't clearly identify, but which created a feeling of discomfort in his chest. The next morning Marcus arrived at the shop expecting a normal workday, but when he opened the gate, he found an expensive bouquet of flowers at the entrance, along with a card that read, "Thank you for letting me reunite with my hero. Fondly, Elizabeth." Daniel arrived shortly after and saw Marcus holding the flowers. "Secret admirer," Daniel joked. "It's the woman from yesterday," Marcus explained, reading the card again. "Wow, she doesn't waste time," Daniel commented. "She must be really grateful." Marcus put the flowers in a vase with water in the office, but he couldn't stop thinking about the message on the card. My hero. The words sounded exaggerated to him. All he had done was help a lost child. It was the least any decent person would do in that situation. Around 10 in the morning, Elizabeth appeared again. This time she was dressed more casually, in a blue silk blouse and black dress pants, but still radiated elegance and wealth. She carried a bag from an expensive downtown cafe. "Good morning, Marcus," she said with a radiant smile. "I brought breakfast for you and your employees." "Elizabeth, that wasn't necessary," Marcus protested, but she was already distributing gourmet pastries and specialty coffees to everyone in the shop. The employees accepted the gifts with obvious gratitude. It was rare for them to receive something so sophisticated, and Marcus could see in their eyes a mixture of pleasure and curiosity about who this generous woman was. "Can I speak with you privately?" asked Elizabeth, after distributing all the food. Marcus took her to the office again, noticing how she looked around, as if she were memorizing every detail of the environment. "How did you sleep last night?" asked Elizabeth, sitting in the same chair as yesterday. The question caught Marcus by surprise. It was too intimate for someone who had just reappeared in his life a day ago. "Well," Marcus lied. "And you?" "Not well," Elizabeth admitted with a sad laugh. "I stayed up all night thinking about our conversation. There are so many things I want to tell you, so many years to make up for." "Elizabeth," said Marcus, trying to be kind but firm, "I'm glad to know you're doing well, really, but you don't need to feel obligated to stay in touch with me." Elizabeth seemed genuinely hurt by the suggestion. "Thank you. Marcus, you don't understand. Finding you again is the best thing that's happened to me in years. Do you know how many nights I've dreamed of this moment?" There was an intensity in her voice that made Marcus shift uncomfortably in his chair. It was as if Elizabeth was investing emotionally much more in that reunion than he could reciprocate. "Maybe we should take it slow," suggested Marcus. 30 years is a long time. We're different people now." "But that's exactly why I want to get to know you again," insisted Elizabeth. "I want to know what man you've become, what life you've built. I want to be a part of it, Marcus." The phrase, "I want to be a part of it," sent an uncomfortable shiver down Marcus's spine. There was a possessiveness in those words that he didn't like. "Elizabeth, I'm married," said Marcus, finding it necessary to make that clear. "I know," replied Elizabeth, seemingly unperturbed by the information. "Rebecca, right? You've been together for 22 years. Marcus froze. He hadn't mentioned his wife's name or how long they'd been married. How did Elizabeth know this information? "How do you know my wife's name?" asked Marcus, his voice growing colder. Elizabeth realized her mistake immediately and tried to recover. "The investigator I hired to find you," she said quickly. "He gave me some basic information about your family, just to make sure I had found the right person." The explanation made sense, but Marcus didn't like the idea of someone investigating his private life. "What other information did he give you?" asked Marcus. "Nothing too detailed," Elizabeth said, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Just the basics. Where you work, how long you've been at the shop, that you're married, public things." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He was beginning to feel as if his privacy had been invaded, even though Elizabeth claimed to have legitimate reasons. "Marcus," said Elizabeth, leaning forward and touching his arm again, "please, don't be upset with me. I just wanted to be sure I had found the right person before making contact. Can you imagine how embarrassing it would be if I was mistaken?" Marcus looked into her eyes and saw what appeared to be genuine vulnerability. Perhaps he was being paranoid. After all, it was natural for someone to do some basic research before approaching a person from the past after so many years. "It's okay," said Marcus, relaxing slightly. "I just felt a little intruded upon, that's all." "I completely understand," Elizabeth said with visible relief. "Next time I'll ask before looking up any information about you." "Next time?" Marcus repeated. Elizabeth blushed slightly. "Sorry, I'm assuming we're going to keep seeing each other. It's just that I've waited so long for this moment that I don't want it to end so quickly." Marcus sighed. There was something about Elizabeth that attracted and repelled him at the same time. She was clearly an intelligent and successful woman, and her gratitude seemed genuine. But there was also an intensity in her that made him uncomfortable. "We can see each other from time to time," Marcus finally said. "But Elizabeth, I have a life here, a wife, a business, a routine. I can't just change everything because you showed up." "Of course," Elizabeth agreed quickly. "I wouldn't expect you to change anything. I just want to have the chance to get to know you better, to share more about my life too." Marcus nodded, feeling he had set some necessary boundaries. But when he looked into Elizabeth's eyes, he saw something that worried him. There was a determination there that went beyond simple gratitude or curiosity. It was as if she had specific plans for their future, plans she wasn't sharing. Elizabeth stayed at the shop for another hour, talking with Marcus and observing the work. She asked detailed questions about the business, about the types of cars they repaired, about the regular clients. Her questions seemed genuinely interested, but Marcus noticed she was taking mental notes of everything. When she finally left, Marcus felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Relief to have some time to process everything alone, and anxiety because he was sure Elizabeth would be back the next day. And he was right. Elizabeth showed up at the shop every day the following week, always with a different excuse. On Monday, she brought homemade sweets she said she made especially for the team. On Tuesday, she showed up with gourmet coffee during the afternoon break. On Wednesday, she arrived with magazines about imported cars she thought Marcus might find interesting. The shop employees began to comment among themselves about Elizabeth's constant presence. Some joked about Marcus having a rich admirer, while others speculated about her reasons for visiting the shop daily. Marcus tried to keep conversations with Elizabeth superficial, but she always found ways to make them more intimate. She shared childhood memories, talked about her past relationships, asked about his dreams and ambitions. Gradually, Marcus found himself being pulled into a deeper friendship than he had planned. It was on Friday that Elizabeth made the first concrete business proposal. "Marcus," she said, during what had become their daily conversation in the office, "I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" asked Marcus, already suspecting what was coming. "My company is expanding into the automotive sector. I'm setting up a network of shops specializing in imported cars. I'd like you to be my partner in the first location here in Los Angeles." Marcus shook his head immediately. "Elizabeth, I already told you I'm not interested in expanding the business." "But Marcus, think of the possibilities," insisted Elizabeth, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "We could create jobs for dozens of people, offer high-quality services, make a lot of money together." "I like what I do here," said Marcus firmly. "This shop is my life. I know every customer, every car, every problem. I don't want something bigger." Elizabeth seemed frustrated for the first time since she had reappeared in his life. "But you have so much potential," she said, her voice growing more insistent. "It's a waste to stay stuck in this small place when you could have so much more." Marcus felt a pang of irritation. There was condescension in Elizabeth's words, as if she were doing him a favor by suggesting he change his life. "This small place has given me everything I have," said Marcus, his voice growing colder. "My home, my family, my dignity. I don't see it as something I need to break free from." Elizabeth realized she had stepped onto dangerous ground and quickly changed tactics. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I didn't mean to imply there was anything wrong with your current life. It's just, I have so much to offer, so many opportunities. I thought you might be interested." "I appreciate the offer," said Marcus, trying to be diplomatic, "but it's really not for me." Elizabeth nodded, but Marcus could see she wasn't giving up. There was a fierce determination in her eyes that made him uncomfortable. That night, Marcus told Rebecca about Elizabeth's proposal. His wife listened in silence, but he could see the worry growing on her face. "Marcus," said Rebecca when he finished, "don't you think it's strange that she shows up out of nowhere and immediately starts offering money and business opportunities?" "What do you mean?" "Think about it. If someone helped you when you were a child and you wanted to thank them as an adult, wouldn't you just say thank you and maybe send a gift? Why is she trying to get involved in your business?" Marcus stopped to consider his wife's words. Rebecca had a valid point. "Maybe she's just a very generous person," suggested Marcus. "Or maybe she has other motives," replied Rebecca. "What other motives?" "I don't know, Marcus, but something isn't right. A rich, successful woman doesn't spend a whole week hanging around a mechanic's shop just out of gratitude." Marcus knew Rebecca was right, but there was something about Elizabeth that intrigued him. Maybe it was male vanity, the feeling of being admired by a sophisticated, successful woman. Maybe it was curiosity about what might have happened to that little girl he had helped so many years ago. Or maybe it was something deeper, a need to believe that his small acts of kindness really did make a difference in the world. "I'll keep seeing her for now," decided Marcus. "But I'll keep an eye out for anything strange." Rebecca didn't seem satisfied with the answer, but she didn't press the matter. She knew her husband well enough to know he needed to figure things out for himself. Over the weekend, Marcus hoped to get a break from Elizabeth's constant presence. But on Saturday morning, while washing the car in his home garage, he saw her black BMW parking in front of the house. Elizabeth got out of the car wearing expensive jeans and a designer top, looking like a more casual version of herself. She carried a picnic basket and smiled as if she were an old family friend paying a casual visit. "Elizabeth?" said Marcus, surprised. "How did you know where I live?" "The investigator," she answered quickly, as if the answer were obvious. "I hope you don't mind. I thought it would be nice to meet your wife." Marcus felt a mix of irritation and anxiety. Elizabeth was clearly overstepping personal boundaries, but she did it in such a natural way that it was hard to confront her directly. Rebecca appeared at the front door, obviously curious about who the visitor was. Marcus made the introductions, carefully watching the reactions of both women. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Rebecca," said Elizabeth with a warm smile. "Marcus has told me so much about you." "He's mentioned you too," replied Rebecca, being polite but reserved. Elizabeth lifted the picnic basket. "I brought some specialties from a deli downtown. I thought we could have lunch together in the garden." Marcus looked at Rebecca, trying to decipher if she was comfortable with the situation. His wife gave a small nod indicating she was willing to try. The lunch was polite but tense. Elizabeth asked questions about Rebecca's life, about how she and Marcus met, about their plans for the future. Her questions seemed genuinely interested, but Rebecca answered briefly and reservedly. "You have a very cozy home," commented Elizabeth, looking around the small backyard. "It must be wonderful to have such a peaceful place to relax." "We like it here," Rebecca replied simply. "Marcus told me you don't have children," continued Elizabeth. Marcus choked on his soda. He didn't remember sharing that information with Elizabeth. Rebecca noticed her husband's reaction, and her face hardened slightly. "It's a personal choice," said Rebecca, her voice growing colder. Elizabeth realized she had touched on a sensitive subject and quickly changed the topic. But the damage was done. Marcus could see that Rebecca was growing increasingly uncomfortable with Elizabeth's presence. After Elizabeth left, Rebecca confronted Marcus immediately. "Did you tell her we don't have children?" "No," Marcus answered honestly. "At least I don't remember talking about it." "Then how did she know?" "It must have been the investigator she hired," suggested Marcus, but the explanation sounded weak, even to him. "Marcus, what kind of investigation includes information about whether a couple has children or not? And why would she need to know that?" Marcus didn't have a good answer for these questions. He was beginning to realize that Rebecca was right about Elizabeth knowing too much about his private life. "Maybe I should be more direct with her about boundaries," admitted Marcus. "Maybe you should stop seeing her completely," suggested Rebecca. "Rebecca, she's just a grateful person who wants to repay an old favor." "Marcus, you are a good man, but sometimes you are too naive," said Rebecca, her frustration finally coming to the surface. "That woman is not here out of gratitude. She wants something from you, and I'm afraid to find out what." That night, Marcus lay awake for hours thinking about the conversation with Rebecca. His wife was rarely wrong about people, and her concerns about Elizabeth were becoming harder to ignore. On Monday, Elizabeth showed up at the shop as usual, but this time Marcus decided to be more direct about his boundaries. "Elizabeth, we need to talk," he said as soon as she arrived. "Of course," she replied, following him into the office. "About what?" "About you coming to my house on Saturday without notice," said Marcus. "It made me uncomfortable." Elizabeth seemed genuinely surprised by the objection. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I thought it would be a pleasant surprise. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. And about you knowing things about my life that I don't remember sharing." Elizabeth hesitated for a moment before answering. "As I said, the investigator gave me some basic information. Perhaps he was more thorough than I expected." "Elizabeth, I need you to understand something," said Marcus, trying to maintain a gentle but firm tone. "I appreciate your gratitude, I really do. But my life is very simple and private. I'm not comfortable with all this attention." Elizabeth was silent for a long moment, looking at her own hands. When she looked up again, Marcus saw tears forming in her eyes. "Marcus, you don't understand," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Finding you again is the most important thing that has happened to me in years. I have no family, no real friends. I have money, I have success, but I have no one who truly cares about me as a person." The vulnerability in Elizabeth's voice touched something in Marcus. Despite all his concerns, he couldn't ignore what seemed like genuine pain. "Elizabeth," he said more gently, "I care about you. I'm glad you found success in life, but that doesn't mean I can fill the emotional void you're feeling." "I'm not asking you to fill anything," protested Elizabeth. "I just want to have you in my life as a friend, as chosen family." The phrase chosen family made Marcus feel even more uncomfortable. There was an implied possessiveness in it that worried him. "We can be friends," said Marcus carefully, "but friendship has boundaries. I can't be the center of your emotional life, Elizabeth." Elizabeth nodded quickly, wiping the tears from her eyes. "Of course, you're right. I'm sorry if I've been too intense. It's hard to control emotions when something so important happens in your life." Marcus felt a pang of guilt. Maybe he had been too harsh with Elizabeth. After all, she had grown up without family, without stable emotional bonds. It was natural for her to cling to the first person who represented a genuine connection to her past. "You don't need to apologize," said Marcus. "We just need to find a balance." Elizabeth smiled through her tears, and for a moment Marcus saw the vulnerable girl he had met so many years ago. "Thank you for being so patient with me," she said. "I promise I'll try to be less invasive." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. In the following days, Elizabeth really seemed to make an effort to respect the boundaries Marcus had set. She didn't show up at the shop every day, and when she did, she stayed for less time. Their conversations were more superficial, less emotionally charged. Marcus began to relax, thinking he might have resolved the situation, but that's when things started to get really strange. First, it was the gifts. Marcus arrived at the shop on a Wednesday morning and found an expensive box on his desk. Inside was a Rolex watch with a card that read, "For the man who taught me that time spent helping others is time best spent." Marcus was deeply uncomfortable with the gift. The watch was worth more than his car, and accepting something so expensive from Elizabeth seemed to cross a line he didn't want to cross. When Elizabeth showed up at the shop that afternoon, Marcus immediately returned the watch. "Elizabeth, I can't accept this," he said, placing the box on the office desk. "Why not?" she asked, looking genuinely hurt. "It's just a gift to show my gratitude." "It's too expensive," Marcus explained. "I don't feel comfortable accepting something like this." "Marcus, money means nothing to me if I can't use it to make the people I love happy." The word love made Marcus shudder. Elizabeth had said it so naturally, as if it were obvious that she loved him. But they had only known each other for a few weeks. "Elizabeth, we barely know each other," Marcus said gently. "Maybe it's too soon for such strong words." Elizabeth blushed, realizing what she had said. "Sorry, I meant people who are important to me. You know how it is. When you're emotional, sometimes the words come out wrong." Marcus nodded, but he wasn't convinced it was just a slip of the tongue. There was something in the way Elizabeth spoke about him that seemed to go far beyond normal gratitude. "Even so, I can't accept the watch," Marcus insisted. Elizabeth sighed, taking the box back. "All right, but promise you'll let me do something special for you. Maybe dinner at a nice restaurant?" Marcus hesitated. Dinner seemed harmless enough, and he didn't want to seem completely inflexible. "Can I bring Rebecca?" he asked. For a split second, Marcus saw something flash across Elizabeth's face. Irritation, perhaps, or disappointment. But she quickly smiled. "Of course, it would be wonderful to get to know your wife better." But when Elizabeth left the shop that afternoon, Marcus noticed she didn't mention the dinner again, and in the following days, whenever he asked about it, she would change the subject or say she was still working out the details. That's when the little accident started. First, it was Rebecca's car. She was coming home from work on a Thursday afternoon when the brakes completely failed. Luckily, she was driving slowly on a residential street and managed to stop the car using the handbrake and bumping into a curb. No one was hurt, but the car was damaged. Marcus examined the brakes himself and was perplexed. The car had just been serviced 2 weeks prior, and there was no obvious reason for the brake failure. "These things happen," said the insurance company's mechanic when he came to inspect the car. "Sometimes systems fail without warning, even in well-maintained cars." Marcus accepted the explanation but was worried. Rebecca could have been seriously injured or worse. A few days later, it was the turn of the electric water heater at home. Marcus came home from work and found Rebecca sitting in the living room, visibly shaken. "What happened?" asked Marcus. "The shower short-circuited while I was taking a shower," explained Rebecca. "I almost got shocked." Marcus examined the shower and was confused. It was a relatively new unit, installed by a professional electrician just a few months before. It shouldn't have had problems so quickly. "I'll call the electrician tomorrow," said Marcus. "For now, let's use the shower in the downstairs bathroom." But when the electrician came the next day, he was as perplexed as Marcus. "It's strange," said the electrician, examining the burnt wires. "It looks like someone tampered with the installation recently. See these wires here? They were reconnected incorrectly." "What do you mean, someone tampered?" asked Marcus. "Someone with electrical knowledge came in here and deliberately sabotaged the shower." But why would anyone do that? Marcus felt a chill in his stomach. The possibility that someone had entered his home and sabotaged the shower was terrifying. But who would do such a thing, and why? That night, Marcus and Rebecca locked themselves in the house and talked about the recent incidents. "Marcus, this can't be a coincidence," said Rebecca, her voice full of fear. "First the brakes on my car, now the shower. Someone is trying to hurt me." "But who?" asked Marcus. "And why?" "I have a suspicion," said Rebecca, hesitating before continuing. "What if it's that woman, Elizabeth?" "Elizabeth?" Marcus repeated, shocked. "Why would she do something like that?" "Think about it, Marcus. She appears in your life out of nowhere, tries to convince you to accept expensive gifts, wants to invest in your business, knows details about our life she shouldn't know. And now, suddenly, I start having strange accidents." Marcus shook his head vigorously. "Rebecca, that's crazy. Elizabeth might be a bit intense, but she's not a criminal." "How can you be so sure?" asked Rebecca. "What do you really know about her besides what she's told you?" Marcus stopped to think. Rebecca had a valid point. All the information he had about Elizabeth came from her herself. He hadn't verified anything independently. "Even if you're right about her having other reasons for seeking me out," said Marcus, "why would she harm you? That doesn't make sense." "It does, if she wants to take you away from me," replied Rebecca. The suggestion was so absurd that Marcus almost laughed. But when he saw the genuine fear in Rebecca's eyes, he realized she was serious. "Elizabeth is not romantically interested in me," said Marcus. "She sees in me a paternal figure, someone who represented security in her childhood." "Marcus, you're a wonderful man, but sometimes you're blind to these things," said Rebecca with frustration. "I'm a woman. I recognize when another woman is interested in my husband, and Elizabeth definitely is." Marcus still couldn't completely believe Rebecca's theory, but the recent incidents were too concerning to ignore. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. "First, we're going to install a security system at home. Cameras, alarms, everything. Second, you're going to stop seeing Elizabeth." "Rebecca." "Marcus, I'm scared," said Rebecca, her words tumbling out. "If you're right and she's harmless, then we lose nothing by stopping. But if I'm right and she's dangerous, then continuing to see her could cost us much more than we're willing to pay." Marcus looked at his wife and saw the genuine fear in her eyes. Rebecca was a strong, practical woman, not given to paranoid fantasies. If she was scared to this point, perhaps there was something real to fear. "All right," Marcus finally said. "I'll keep my distance from Elizabeth for now, and we'll install the security system." Rebecca sighed with relief, hugging her husband. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know this is hard for you, but I have a bad feeling about all of this." Marcus nodded, hugging his wife back. But deep down, he still had doubts. Elizabeth had seemed so genuinely grateful, so vulnerable in her confessions about loneliness. It was hard to reconcile that image with someone capable of sabotaging Rebecca's car. The next day, Marcus tried to avoid Elizabeth when she showed up at the shop. He stayed busy with cars in the service area, away from the office where they usually talked. But Elizabeth was persistent, waiting until he had a free moment. "Marcus, are you avoiding me?" she asked when she finally got to speak with him. "No, I'm just very busy today," Marcus lied. Elizabeth studied him for a moment with those sharp blue eyes. "Did something happen? You seem different." Marcus hesitated. Part of him wanted to confront Elizabeth directly about the incidents, but another part didn't want to accuse her without proof. "Elizabeth, I think we need to take a break," he finally said. "Things are getting too complicated." "Complicated how?" asked Elizabeth, her voice growing tighter. "My wife is uncomfortable with our friendship," explained Marcus, "and I need to respect her feelings." Elizabeth was silent for a long moment, her face going through several expressions. Marcus saw surprise, then hurt, then something that looked like irritation. "Your wife is jealous," Elizabeth finally said, her voice cold. "She doesn't want you to have a successful friend." "It's not about jealousy," Marcus protested. "It's about boundaries and respect." "Marcus, you're letting your wife ruin the most beautiful thing that's happened to you two in years," said Elizabeth, her voice growing more intense. "I could transform your lives, give you amazing opportunities, and she's sabotaging it all out of insecurity." Elizabeth's choice of words made Marcus's skin crawl. Sabotaging was exactly what had happened to Rebecca's car and shower. "Elizabeth, I've made my decision," Marcus said firmly. "I need you to respect that." Elizabeth looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. It was anger, pure and cold, quickly masked by an expression of wounded hurt. "All right," Elizabeth finally said. "If that's what you want, I'll respect your decision." But when she left the shop that afternoon, Marcus had the feeling it wouldn't be the last time he'd see her. And he was right. Elizabeth began to appear in places where Marcus didn't expect to find her. At the supermarket where he and Rebecca shopped, at the diner where he had lunch on Thursdays, at the church they attended on Sundays. Whenever Marcus saw her, Elizabeth would wave politely and sometimes approach to exchange a few polite words. She was never directly confrontational or threatening, but her constant presence began to make Marcus nervous. "She's following you," said Rebecca, after they encountered Elizabeth at the bank where they handled their financial transactions. "Maybe they're just coincidences," suggested Marcus, though he himself no longer believed that. "Marcus, you need to confront her directly," said Rebecca. "This situation is getting out of control." Marcus knew Rebecca was right, but confronting Elizabeth was more complicated than it seemed. She never did anything directly threatening, and she always had plausible explanations for her presence in the same places they were. The situation reached a breaking point on a Friday evening. Marcus and Rebecca had decided to dine out to try to relax a bit from the tension of the last few weeks. They chose a small, discreet restaurant in the neighboring district, a place they rarely frequented. They were in the middle of dinner when Elizabeth appeared at the restaurant door. She looked around as if searching for a table, and when she saw them, she seemed genuinely surprised. "Marcus, Rebecca," she said, approaching their table. "What a lovely coincidence." "Hi, Elizabeth," said Marcus tensely. "May I join you?" asked Elizabeth. "I'm dining alone, and it would be wonderful to have company." Marcus looked at Rebecca and saw that his wife was clearly uncomfortable, but refusing Elizabeth's request in front of other people would be very rude. "Of course," said Marcus reluctantly. Elizabeth sat in the vacant chair and immediately began talking animatedly, as if there were no tension at the table. She asked about the dinner, commented on the restaurant's decor, shared a funny anecdote about her own work, but Marcus noticed small, disturbing details. Elizabeth knew his favorite dishes, casually mentioned that she knew they liked red wine, and referenced a conversation that Marcus was sure he had never had with her. When they finally said goodbye in the parking lot, Elizabeth hugged Marcus a little tighter and a little longer than would be appropriate. Rebecca saw the hug, and Marcus could feel the tension emanating from her. "Elizabeth," said Rebecca, her voice sharp, "I need to speak with you." "Of course," replied Elizabeth, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rebecca stepped closer to Elizabeth, moving near enough to speak without other restaurant patrons hearing. "I know what you're doing," said Rebecca, "and I want it to stop." "I don't know what you're talking about," replied Elizabeth, maintaining the false smile. "You are stalking my husband, appearing wherever we go, making up excuses to be near him. This needs to stop." Elizabeth looked at Marcus as if expecting him to defend her. When Marcus said nothing, she turned her attention back to Rebecca. "Rebecca, I understand you might feel threatened by my friendship with Marcus," said Elizabeth, her voice full of false understanding. "But I assure you my intentions are completely innocent." "Your intentions may be innocent, but your methods are not," retorted Rebecca. "A normal person doesn't hire investigators to find out intimate details about someone's life. A normal person doesn't magically appear in the same places you're trying to avoid her." Elizabeth lost her smile for a moment, and Marcus saw the coldness he had glimpsed a few times before. "Perhaps the problem isn't with me, but with your own insecurity," said Elizabeth, her voice growing colder. "Marcus is a good man, but he's not the only good man in the world. If you're so worried about him knowing me, perhaps you should ask yourself what that says about your own relationship." The remark hit Rebecca like a punch to the stomach. Marcus saw his wife recoil as if she had been physically attacked. "Elizabeth, that was unnecessary," said Marcus, finally intervening. Elizabeth immediately changed her expression, returning to the mask of wounded innocence. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I didn't mean that. It's painful to be misunderstood when all I want to do is express gratitude." But the damage was done. Rebecca had seen Elizabeth's true face for a few seconds, and Marcus had too. There was cruelty there, a deliberate will to hurt. On the way home, Rebecca was silent. Marcus tried to start a conversation several times, but she only responded with monosyllables. "Rebecca, did you see what I saw?" Marcus finally asked. "I saw a woman who is very good at pretending to be a victim when confronted," replied Rebecca. "And I saw that she knows exactly which buttons to push to hurt." "Her comment about our relationship was cruel," admitted Marcus. "It was calculated," corrected Rebecca. "She knew exactly where it would hurt the most." Marcus took Rebecca's hand and squeezed it. "You know she's wrong, don't you? Our relationship is solid." "I know," said Rebecca, but her voice was less convinced than Marcus had hoped. "It's just, she made me question things I've never questioned before." Marcus felt a wave of anger toward Elizabeth. Wasn't it enough that she was pursuing him? Now she was planting seeds of doubt in his marriage. "Rebecca, I love you," said Marcus, stopping the car and looking into his wife's eyes. "I love our life, our home, our simple routine. Elizabeth can offer money and opportunities, but she can't offer what we have together." Rebecca smiled for the first time in weeks, and Marcus felt immense relief. "I love you too," she said, "and that's why I'm so scared. I'm afraid she'll find a way to pull us apart." "That won't happen," promised Marcus. "Tomorrow I'll make it clear to Elizabeth that our friendship is definitively over." But when Marcus arrived at the shop on Monday morning, he received a surprise that completely changed his perspective on the situation. Daniel was waiting for him, with a worried expression on his face. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," said Daniel, looking around nervously. "What is it?" "It's about that woman, Elizabeth. Last night I was passing by here to pick up some tools I forgot, and I saw her across the street, inside her car, watching the shop." Marcus felt his stomach sink. "Are you sure it was her?" "Absolutely. It was the same black BMW, and when I turned on my phone's flashlight to open the gate, she drove off quickly. But I saw her well before that." "How long do you think she was there?" "I don't know. But from what I saw, she wasn't just passing by. She was really watching, as if she were studying the place." Marcus sat down heavily in the office chair. The situation was getting worse, and he had no idea how to handle it. "Daniel, do you think we should call the police?" Daniel shook his head. "To say what? That a woman was sitting in her own car on a public street? They won't take it seriously." Marcus knew Daniel was right. Elizabeth was too careful to do anything that could easily be characterized as a crime. "What do you think she wants?" asked Marcus. "I don't know, boss, but one thing I know. Women like that don't give up easily when they want something. Daniel's words echoed in Marcus's mind all day. He tried to work normally, but he was constantly looking out the window, expecting to see Elizabeth's black BMW. She didn't show up that day nor the next. For a moment, Marcus thought that maybe she had finally gotten the message and given up. But on Wednesday, he received a phone call that changed everything. "Hello, Marcus Thompson," said a female voice he didn't recognize. "Yes, speaking. My name is Dr. Patricia Williams. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm calling on behalf of my patient, Elizabeth Harrison. She told me you are friends." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Not exactly friends," he said carefully. "We met recently." "I see. Elizabeth is going through a very difficult emotional time, and your name comes up frequently in our sessions. She seems to have a very strong connection with you." "Doctor, with all due respect, I'm not comfortable discussing this." "Of course, I completely understand. I only called because Elizabeth is in a rather fragile state, and any support you could offer would be very beneficial for her recovery." Marcus was confused. Elizabeth hadn't seemed fragile when she confronted him at the restaurant. She had seemed calculating and cruel. "What kind of fragility?" asked Marcus, despite his reservations. "I can't share specific details because of doctor-patient confidentiality," said Dr. Patricia. "But I can say she has a history of abandonment issues and obsessive attachments. When she latches onto someone, it's very intense." "Obsessive attachments," repeated Marcus. "Yes. Elizabeth had a very traumatic childhood, was abandoned several times by important figures in her life. As a result, when she finds someone who represents emotional security, she can become excessively attached." Marcus felt as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. "Doctor, does Elizabeth have a history of stalking behavior?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Thompson, I cannot discuss specific patient behaviors, but I can say you should be careful in how you handle the situation. Elizabeth does not respond well to rejection." "What does that mean, exactly?" "It means that if you need to set boundaries with her, you should do so very carefully and gradually. Abrupt cutoffs can trigger severe episodes." Marcus was beginning to get truly frightened. "Doctor, my wife has had some strange accidents recently, brakes that failed, electrical problems. Could that be related to Elizabeth?" Another long pause. "Mr. Thompson, I suggest you take steps to protect your safety and that of your family. And if Elizabeth contacts you again, call me immediately." The call ended, leaving Marcus with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Elizabeth was far more dangerous than he had imagined. Marcus immediately called Rebecca and told her about the conversation with the psychologist. "My God, Marcus," said Rebecca, her voice full of fear. "What are we going to do?" "I'm going to call the police," decided Marcus. "They might not be able to do much, but at least there will be a record of the situation." Marcus called the local police station and explained the situation to the officer on duty. As Daniel had predicted, the police couldn't do much without concrete evidence of a crime. But they offered to make more frequent patrols around the shop and Marcus's house. "Mr. Thompson," said the officer, "I suggest you document any contact this woman makes. Photos, recordings, anything that can prove a pattern of stalking. When we have enough evidence, we can request a restraining order." Marcus agreed, but he knew documenting evidence would be easier said than done. Elizabeth was smart and careful. If it was so easy to prove what she was doing, the psychologist wouldn't have been so cautious when speaking with him. That night, Marcus installed security cameras around the house and the shop. Rebecca suggested they also change their routines, going to different places at different times to make it harder for Elizabeth to predict them. For a few days, the strategy seemed to work. They didn't see Elizabeth anywhere, and Marcus began to hope she had given up or found another obsession. But then the flowers arrived. Marcus showed up at the shop on a Monday morning and found a bouquet of red roses at the door, along with a card that read, "For the man who saved my soul, with eternal love, E." The words eternal love sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. There was a possessiveness in them that went far beyond normal gratitude. The next day, it was expensive chocolates. The day after that, a book of poetry with several passages underlined about unrequited love and destiny. Marcus documented all the gifts, as the police had suggested, but he began to feel increasingly cornered. Elizabeth was sending a clear message. She had not given up, and she wasn't going to. It was then that Marcus made a drastic decision. He would confront Elizabeth directly, one last time, and make it absolutely clear that she needed to leave his life. Marcus knew where Elizabeth worked. She had mentioned her company's name during one of their first conversations. He decided to go to her office for a final, definitive conversation. The building where Elizabeth's company was located was impressive, all glass and steel, in the heart of Los Angeles's financial district. Marcus felt intimidated by the luxury and sophistication of the place, but he was determined not to let it affect him. The receptionist informed him that Elizabeth was in a meeting, but Marcus said he would wait. He had taken the afternoon off from the shop specifically to resolve this situation, and he wasn't leaving without speaking to her. After an hour of waiting, Elizabeth finally appeared in the lobby. She was dressed in an elegant suit and looked every bit the successful executive, but when she saw Marcus, her eyes lit up in a way that made him uncomfortable. "Marcus," she said, approaching quickly. "What a wonderful surprise. You came to see me at work." "Elizabeth, we need to talk," said Marcus, keeping his voice firm and low. "In private." Elizabeth led him to an empty conference room, and Marcus noticed how she closed the door and lowered the blinds, creating total privacy. "Elizabeth," Marcus began without preamble, "I need you to stop sending me gifts, stop showing up at places I frequent, and stop trying to contact me completely." Elizabeth seemed genuinely hurt by the statement. "Marcus, I don't understand why you're being so cruel to me." "I'm not being cruel, I'm establishing necessary boundaries." "But why?" insisted Elizabeth, her eyes filling with tears. "All I've done is try to show gratitude and affection for someone who changed my life. Elizabeth, I spoke with your psychologist." Elizabeth froze, the tears stopping abruptly. "You spoke with Dr. Patricia?" "Yes. She told me about your problems with obsessive attachments." Elizabeth was silent for a long moment, and Marcus saw several emotions cross her face: shame, anger, and something that might have been relief at finally being found out. "What exactly did she tell you?" Elizabeth asked finally. "Enough for me to understand that you need professional help, not a friend who can feed your obsessions." Elizabeth rose from her chair and began pacing the room, her hands trembling slightly. "Marcus, you don't understand," she said, her voice growing more agitated. "I don't choose to feel this way. It's stronger than me. When I find someone who represents everything I've ever looked for—" "Elizabeth, I can't be that person for you," Marcus interrupted. "I'm just a married mechanic who helped a child a long time ago. I'm not the savior you're looking for." "But you are," Elizabeth exploded, turning to face him. "You were the first person who ever showed me genuine kindness. Without you, I would have—" "Elizabeth, you've built a fantasy around a moment that lasted a few hours nearly 3 decades ago. That's not healthy." Elizabeth stopped walking and looked at him with an expression Marcus had never seen before. It was intense, almost fierce. "You think it's fantasy," she said, her voice growing lower and more dangerous. "You think what I feel for you is imagination." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in the shift in Elizabeth's tone that frightened him. "Elizabeth, what you feel for me isn't real," he said gently, trying to calm her. "It's a projection of unresolved emotional needs." "Don't tell me what's real," shouted Elizabeth, slamming her hand on the table. "You know nothing about what's real for me." Marcus stood up, beginning to feel threatened by her sudden change in behavior. "Elizabeth, I think I'd better leave," he said, moving toward the door. "No!" Elizabeth moved quickly, placing herself between Marcus and the door. "You can't just walk away, not after everything we've built together." "We haven't built anything together," said Marcus firmly. "You built a fantasy, and now you need to let it go." Elizabeth looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw genuine tears forming in her eyes again. "Marcus," she said, her voice becoming pleading once more, "please, don't abandon me like everyone else did. I promise I can change, I can be less intense, I can—" Elizabeth, it's not about change. It's about the fact that what you want from me is not something I can or should give. Elizabeth moved closer to him, and Marcus had to resist the urge to step back. I could make you happy, she whispered, happier than your wife ever could. I can give you things she never dreamed of giving. Elizabeth, stop, said Marcus firmly. You're crossing a line that can't be uncrossed. What line? Asked Elizabeth, moving even closer. The line of admitting there's a connection between us. The line of acknowledging that destiny brought us back to each other. Marcus put his hands on Elizabeth's shoulders and gently but firmly moved her away. The line between gratitude and obsession, he said. Between connection and fantasy. Between healthy love and unhealthy fixation. Elizabeth stopped, as if Marcus's words had been a bucket of cold water. For a moment, Marcus saw clarity in her eyes, as if she were actually hearing what he was saying. You think I'm sick? She asked quietly. I think you need help, said Marcus gently. And I think continuing our friendship isn't going to help either of us. Elizabeth nodded slowly, and Marcus thought for a moment that he had finally managed to get through to her. But when she looked up again, there was something cold and calculating in her eyes. I understand, she said, her voice turning neutral. You've made your decision. Yes, confirmed Marcus. And I hope you can respect that. Of course, said Elizabeth, opening the conference room door. Thank you for being so honest with me. There was something in the way she said honest that made Marcus feel uneasy, but he was relieved to have finally had a frank conversation with her. When Marcus got home that night, he told Rebecca about the conversation with Elizabeth. How did she react? Asked Rebecca. At first, she was very upset, but in the end, she seemed to accept the situation. Do you believe she'll respect your boundaries? Marcus hesitated before answering. There was something about Elizabeth's sudden shift from emotion to cold calculation that bothered him. I hope so, he said finally. But let's keep taking precautions for now. Marcus was right to be cautious. In the following days, Elizabeth didn't show up at the workshop or send gifts, but Marcus had a persistent feeling of being watched. Several times he turned around quickly, expecting to see her, but there was never anyone there. Rebecca also reported the same feeling of being watched. She noticed cars that seemed to follow her, people who appeared in the same places she frequented too often, small signs that someone had been in the house when she wasn't there. Marcus, I think she hired someone to watch us, Rebecca said one evening. Why do you think that? Because she's too smart to keep doing this personally after the conversation you had, but she's also too obsessed to simply give up. Rebecca's theory made sense, but it was even more disturbing than Elizabeth pursuing them directly. If she had the resources to hire people to watch them, their options were much more limited. It was then that Marcus received a phone call that completely changed his understanding of the situation. Mr. Thompson, said a male voice he didn't recognize. Yes? My name is Charles Morrison. I'm a private investigator. I was hired by Mrs. Elizabeth Harrison to investigate you a few weeks ago. Marcus felt his stomach sink. There was something in the man's tone that suggested bad news. Why are you calling me? Because I'm not comfortable with what she's asking me to do now. What is she asking? She wants me to find ways to create problems for your wife. Nothing that can be traced back to her, but things that would make your wife's life very difficult. Marcus felt a wave of anger and fear. What kind of problems? Problems at work, credit problems, maybe some small accidents. She was very specific about wanting your wife to feel insecure and vulnerable. Marcus clenched his fist around the phone. And are you going to do it? No, said Charles firmly. That's why I'm calling you. Mrs. Harrison hiring someone to investigate your life is one thing. Her actively wanting to harm your family is completely different. Thank you for warning me, said Marcus. Do you have any advice on how to proceed? Document everything. Record this conversation if you can, and seek legal help as soon as possible. Mrs. Harrison has resources and connections, but what she's planning is illegal. Marcus hung up the phone with trembling hands. Elizabeth had officially crossed the line from harmless stalking to conspiracy, to deliberately harm his family. He immediately called Rebecca and told her to come straight home, no stops. Then he called the police and reported the conversation with the private investigator. This time the police took the situation more seriously. Conspiring to deliberately harm someone was a real crime, and they had a witness willing to confirm Elizabeth's plans. "Mr. Thompson," said the detective, "we will issue a restraining order against Mrs. Harrison immediately. She will not be allowed within 300 meters of you or your property. If she violates that order, we can arrest her." Marcus sighed with relief. Finally, there was legal protection between his family and Elizabeth. But when the police went to deliver the restraining order at Elizabeth's office, they discovered she had disappeared. Her colleagues said she had requested indefinite medical leave and left no contact information. "Is that good or bad?" asked Rebecca when Marcus told her about Elizabeth's disappearance. "I don't know," admitted Marcus. "It could be that she finally understood the seriousness of the situation and decided to seek help. Or it could be that she's planning something worse." They decided to maintain security precautions for now, hoping Elizabeth would eventually reappear or that the situation would resolve itself naturally. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. 2 weeks passed without any sign of Elizabeth. Marcus began to relax slightly, thinking that perhaps she had finally given up or sought professional help. Rebecca was more cautious, but even she admitted feeling a bit safer. That's when Marcus received a call from Dr. Patricia, Elizabeth's psychologist. "Mr. Thompson, I need to speak with you urgently." "What happened?" "Elizabeth has disappeared. She hasn't shown up for our sessions in the last 2 weeks, doesn't answer calls or emails, and her co-workers say she took medical leave." Marcus told the psychologist about the restraining order and Elizabeth's disappearance. "Dr. Patricia, is this normal for her, to vanish like this?" "No," replied the psychologist, her voice full of concern. "Elizabeth is very methodical and controlled. She wouldn't do something impulsive like simply disappear. What worries me is that she might be planning something." "What kind of thing?" "Mr. Thompson, Elizabeth has episodes of dissociation when under extreme stress. During these episodes, she might do things she normally wouldn't, things she doesn't even remember afterward." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Are you saying she could be violent?" "I'm saying that when she feels rejected and cornered, her judgment becomes impaired. If she is planning something, it could be very dangerous for both you and herself." Marcus hung up the phone and immediately called the police to report the conversation. They promised to increase surveillance around the house and the shop, but Marcus knew the police couldn't protect them 24 hours a day. That night, Marcus barely slept. Every noise in the house made him jump. Every moving shadow outside put him on alert. Rebecca was equally tense, and they spent the night whispering about what they should do. "Maybe we should leave town for a while," suggested Rebecca. "Go to my sister's house in the countryside until this situation is resolved." "And abandon everything we've built here?" asked Marcus. "The shop? Our home? Our life?" "Temporarily," insisted Rebecca, "just until we're sure she's no longer a threat." Marcus knew Rebecca had a point, but the idea of being forced to abandon his life because of someone else's obsession made him furious. "Let's see how things develop over the next few days," decided Marcus. "If there's any sign she's around, we'll consider leaving temporarily." But the next day, Marcus discovered it might already be too late for that precaution. He arrived at the shop early in the morning, as he always did, and immediately noticed something was wrong. The lock on the main door had been forced, and there were signs someone had been there during the night. Marcus called the police before even entering the building, but when they arrived and conducted a thorough search, they found nothing missing. In fact, it seemed whoever had broken in wasn't interested in stealing anything. "So why would someone break in without taking anything?" asked Marcus the detective. "To send a message," the detective replied grimly, "or to install something." They brought in a technical team to search for listening devices or hidden cameras, and they found 3 small cameras installed in strategic locations around the shop. They were all expensive, sophisticated equipment, the kind only someone with considerable resources could buy. "It's her," Marcus told the detective. "Elizabeth installed these cameras to spy on me." "Probably," agreed the detective. But now she's violated the restraining order. If we can catch her, we can arrest her. Marcus called Rebecca to warn her about the break-in, and they decided to do a thorough search of the house as well. To their horror, they found similar cameras installed in several rooms of the house, including the couple's bedroom. The violation of privacy was devastating. Knowing that Elizabeth had been watching the most intimate moments of their lives made Marcus feel sick and violated. "How long do you think these cameras have been here?" asked Rebecca. "Judging by the installation, at least a few weeks," replied the police technician. Whoever did this had the time and access to do a very thorough job. Marcus remembered all the moments in the last few weeks when he had felt he was being watched. It wasn't paranoia. Elizabeth really was watching his every move. "She saw everything," said Marcus, sitting down heavily on the living room sofa. "Every conversation we had about her, every intimate moment." Rebecca sat beside him and took his hand. "Marcus, we will get through this," she said firmly. "We won't let this woman destroy our life." But Marcus could see that Rebecca was as shaken as he was. The privacy violation had struck something fundamental in both of them, a sense of security in their own home that might never be fully recovered. The police redoubled their efforts to find Elizabeth, but she seemed to have completely vanished. There was no activity in her bank accounts, her car hadn't been seen, and none of her acquaintances knew where she was. "It's as if she just evaporated," the detective told Marcus a few days later. "But a person with her resources can hide for a long time if she wants to." Marcus began to wonder if Elizabeth could have left the city or even the country. Part of him hoped it was true, but another part knew that obsessive people like Elizabeth rarely gave up so easily. It was a week after the cameras were discovered that Marcus received the call he had been dreading. "Hello?" He answered the workshop phone. "Hello, Marcus," said the familiar voice of Elizabeth. Marcus signaled to Daniel, who immediately called the police on another phone. "Elizabeth, where are you?" "Nearby," she said, her voice sounding strangely calm. "Watching you, as always." "Elizabeth, you need to turn yourself in. There's a restraining order against you, and the police are looking for you for trespassing." Elizabeth laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Do you think I care about restraining orders at this point? Do you think I care what the police want?" Marcus felt a chill of fear. There was something in Elizabeth's voice that was different, more unsteady than he had ever heard before. "Elizabeth, you need help. Dr. Patricia is worried about you." "Dr. Patricia doesn't understand," said Elizabeth, her voice growing more agitated. "No one understands what you mean to me." "Elizabeth, what I mean to you is a fantasy. It's not real." "Don't tell me what's real," shouted Elizabeth, her composure finally breaking. "I know what's real. I know what I feel. I know what you mean to me." Marcus tried to keep his voice calm and firm. "Elizabeth, where are you? We can talk in person, resolve this civilly." "You want to talk?" asked Elizabeth, and Marcus could hear a shift in her voice that frightened him. "Yes," said Marcus, hoping the police could trace the call. "Then come to the place where it all began," said Elizabeth. "Palm Street, number 847. You know where it is." Marcus felt his stomach sink. Elizabeth was calling him to the exact location where he had found the lost girl 29 years ago. "Elizabeth, let's meet in a public place with other people around." "No!" shouted Elizabeth. "It's there or it's nowhere. You have 1 hour, Marcus. If you don't show up, I'll have to take more drastic measures." "What kind of measures?" "Your wife works at Lincoln Public School, doesn't she?" said Elizabeth, her voice turning cold and calculating. Marcus's blood ran cold. Elizabeth was threatening Rebecca. "Elizabeth, leave my wife out of this, then show up at the agreed location. 1 hour, Marcus. Don't keep me waiting." The call ended, leaving Marcus with a racing heart and trembling hands. The detective arrived at the workshop 15 minutes later, along with a team of technicians who had tried to trace the call. "Were you able to locate where she called from?" asked Marcus. "A payphone downtown," replied the detective, "but she probably left there a long time ago." Marcus told him about Elizabeth's ultimatum and her threat against Rebecca. "You can't go meet her," said the detective firmly. "It's obviously a trap, but if I don't, she'll go after my wife. We'll send a team to protect your wife at her workplace, and we'll set up an operation at the meeting spot. If she shows up there, we'll arrest her. Marcus wasn't convinced the police could protect Rebecca and arrest Elizabeth simultaneously. Elizabeth had proven to be very smart and unpredictable. "I want to go to the meeting," said Marcus, "with police protection, but I want to go." "Mr. Thompson, it's too dangerous. A person in the mental state she's in is capable of anything." "Exactly," said Marcus. "And what if she really harms Rebecca because I didn't show up? I couldn't live with myself." After much discussion, the police agreed to let Marcus go to the meeting, but with a protection team strategically positioned around the area. They also equipped Marcus with a communication device so he could call for help instantly if needed. Marcus called Rebecca and warned her about the situation. She wanted to come with him, but Marcus convinced her to stay at the school, where there would be police officers to protect her. "Marcus, please be careful," begged Rebecca. "This woman isn't thinking rationally. She could do anything." "I know," said Marcus. "But maybe I can talk to her, make her understand she needs help." "And if you can't?" Marcus hesitated before answering. "Then at least I'll have tried to end this once and for all." An hour later, Marcus was standing on Palm Street, number 847, the exact spot where he had found a lost girl 29 years ago. The neighborhood had changed significantly over the decades. The old corner bakery had been replaced by a cell phone store, and many of the old houses had been torn down to make way for small apartment buildings. Marcus could see undercover police officers strategically positioned around the area, but he couldn't spot Elizabeth anywhere. He wondered if she had changed her mind or if she was simply watching from afar, deciding if it was safe to approach. It was the longest 15 minutes of Marcus's life. He stood on the sidewalk, constantly looking around, trying to detect any sign of Elizabeth or imminent danger. Finally, he saw her. Elizabeth emerged from a side street, walking slowly toward him. She was dressed simply, jeans and a plain blouse, very different from the sophisticated elegance he had grown accustomed to seeing. But what shocked him most was her physical appearance. She had lost weight, her hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Marcus," she said when she was close enough to speak, "you came." "I did," replied Marcus, trying to keep his voice calm. "Elizabeth, you don't look well. When was the last time you ate anything?" Elizabeth laughed, but it was a humorless sound. "You're worried about me? After everything that's happened?" "I've always been worried about you," said Marcus honestly, "but not in the way you wanted me to be." Elizabeth looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw tears forming in her eyes. "Why can't you love me, Marcus?" she asked, her voice breaking. "After everything I've done, everything I've offered, why can't you just love me?" "Elizabeth, what you offered wasn't love," said Marcus gently. "It was obsession, it was control. It was an attempt to turn me into something I'm not, to fill a void that only you can fill." "That's not true," protested Elizabeth, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is true, and deep down you know it," insisted Marcus. "What you feel for me has nothing to do with me as a person. It has to do with what you need me to be, for you to feel complete." Elizabeth began to cry more intensely, and Marcus felt a pang of compassion for her. Despite everything she had done, it was clear she was suffering deeply. "Elizabeth, you need help," said Marcus, taking a careful step toward her. "You need to go back to Dr. Patricia. You need to take your medication. You need to learn healthy ways to connect with people." "And you?" asked Elizabeth, looking into his eyes. "Will you be there to support me during the treatment?" Marcus hesitated. He wanted to help her, but he knew his presence in her life would only fuel her obsessions. "I can't be part of your healing process," he said gently. "My presence would only make things harder for you." Elizabeth nodded slowly, and for a moment Marcus thought she was finally understanding. "You're right," she said, her voice becoming strangely calm. "You can't be part of my healing." There was something in the sudden shift of tone that alarmed Marcus. He discreetly touched the communication device the police had given him, signaling he needed immediate support. "But if I can't have you," Elizabeth continued, her voice growing colder, "then I won't let your wife have you either." Marcus saw Elizabeth pull something from inside her bag, and his heart stopped. It was a small pistol, the kind that could be easily hidden. "Elizabeth, don't do this," said Marcus, trying to keep his voice calm despite the terror he was feeling. "You forced me to this," said Elizabeth, pointing the gun at him. "I offered you everything, and you chose her." Marcus could hear sirens approaching in the distance, but he knew the police wouldn't arrive in time if Elizabeth decided to pull the trigger. "Elizabeth, if you hurt me, you'll never have the chance to get what you really need," said Marcus, trying to buy time. "And what is it that I really need?" asked Elizabeth, her hand trembling slightly as she held the gun. "Peace," said Marcus. "Freedom from the obsession that's consuming you. The chance to find real, healthy love with someone who can truly return it." "You don't understand," said Elizabeth, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want love from anyone else. I only want your love." "Elizabeth, what you want from me isn't love," said Marcus, desperate to make her understand. "It's possession. It's control. True love wants what's best for the loved one, even if it means letting them go." Elizabeth seemed to consider his words for a moment, and Marcus saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Perhaps you're right," she said finally. "Perhaps I never really loved you. Perhaps I only loved the idea of you." "That's exactly it," said Marcus, feeling a pang of hope. "And when you fully understand that, you can begin to heal." Elizabeth nodded slowly, and for a moment Marcus thought she was going to lower the gun. But then she smiled, and it was a cold, lifeless smile. "You're right, Marcus. I love the idea of you. And if I can't have the reality, I'll keep the idea forever." Marcus realized with horror what she was planning to do. Elizabeth wasn't going to shoot him. She was going to shoot herself, creating a final tragedy that would forever link their destinies in her mind. "Elizabeth, don't!" shouted Marcus, taking a step toward her. But before Elizabeth could turn the gun on herself, or before Marcus could reach her, two things happened simultaneously. The police officers emerged from their hiding places, shouting for Elizabeth to drop the weapon, and a woman's voice cried out from across the street, "Elizabeth, stop!" Everyone turned to see a woman running toward them. Marcus didn't recognize her immediately, but Elizabeth clearly did. "Dr. Patricia," said Elizabeth, her voice full of confusion. The psychologist approached slowly, her hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "Elizabeth, put the gun down," said Dr. Patricia in a calm but firm voice. "You don't want to do this." "I have to do this," insisted Elizabeth, but her voice sounded less convinced. "It's the only way." "It's not the only way," said Dr. Patricia, continuing to approach carefully. "There are other options, Elizabeth. There are always other options." Marcus could see Elizabeth's internal conflict reflected on her face. Part of her wanted to proceed with whatever dramatic plan she had made, but another part was responding to the familiar, reassuring voice of her therapist. "Dr. Patricia," said Elizabeth, her voice becoming more childlike, "he doesn't love me. Even after everything I did for him, he doesn't love me." "I know," said Dr. Patricia gently, "and that must be very painful for you. But hurting yourself or other people won't change that." Elizabeth began to cry again, and Marcus could see her resolve crumbling. "I feel so lost," whispered Elizabeth. "So alone." "You don't have to feel alone," said Dr. Patricia, now just a few meters from Elizabeth. "There are people who care about you, Elizabeth. People who want to help you find a better path." Elizabeth looked at Marcus, then at Dr. Patricia, then at the police officers around them. Marcus could see that the reality of the situation was finally piercing the fog of her obsession. "I've done terrible things," said Elizabeth, her voice breaking. "I frightened innocent people, invaded their privacy, threatened to hurt." "You can make this right," said Dr. Patricia, "but first you need to put the gun down and come with me." Elizabeth looked at the pistol in her hand, as if seeing it for the first time. Slowly, very slowly, she placed it on the ground and kicked it toward the police. Immediately the officers moved to arrest Elizabeth, but Dr. Patricia intervened. "Please be gentle with her," the psychologist requested. "She is in a state of acute mental crisis." Marcus watched as Elizabeth was handcuffed and placed in a police car. Before the door was closed, she looked at him one last time. "Marcus," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "I'm sorry." "I know," replied Marcus, "and I hope you find the peace you're looking for." The police car drove away, taking Elizabeth into custody, and, Marcus hoped, to the treatment she desperately needed. Dr. Patricia approached Marcus as the other officers organized the scene. "How did you know to be here?" asked Marcus. "Elizabeth called me this morning," explained Dr. Patricia. "She was in a dissociative state, talking about finally settling everything. I managed to figure out what she was planning and rushed here. Will she be okay?" Dr. Patricia sighed deeply. "With proper treatment, yes. Elizabeth has a serious mental illness, but it is treatable. The problem is she resisted treatment for so long that it reached this crisis point. And now? Now she will likely spend some time in a mental health facility where she can receive the intensive care she needs. With proper medication and therapy, she can learn to manage her obsessions and develop healthy relationships." Marcus nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because the situation had ended without anyone getting hurt, and sadness for the obvious pain Elizabeth was carrying. "Dr. Patricia," said Marcus, "is there anything I could have done differently? Any way I could have prevented it from reaching this point?" The psychologist shook her head. "Mr. Thompson, you are not responsible for what happened. Elizabeth created a fantasy around you that had no basis in reality. No matter what you had done, she would have found a way to interpret it as confirmation of her feelings. But what if I really helped her when she was a child? Doesn't that give me some responsibility for her?" "Helping a lost child makes you a decent person," said Dr. Patricia. "It doesn't make you responsible for every decision that child makes for the next 30 years. Marcus knew she was right, but he still felt troubled by the whole situation. An hour later, Marcus was back at the shop trying to return to normal work. But it was hard to focus on engines and brakes when his mind kept going back to Elizabeth and the look in her eyes when she finally realized what she had done. Rebecca arrived at the shop in the late afternoon as soon as the police released her from protective custody at the school. "How are you?" she asked, hugging Marcus tightly. "I'm okay," said Marcus. "And you?" "Scared, but relieved," admitted Rebecca. "It's strange to think it's really over." "It's over," agreed Marcus. "At least I hope it is." They held each other for a long moment, processing what had happened and what it meant for the future. "Marcus," Rebecca said eventually, "I don't want you to blame yourself for what happened. How did you know I was blaming myself?" "Because I've known you for 22 years, said Rebecca with a sad smile, "and I know you always take responsibility for things that are beyond your control." Marcus laughed for the first time in weeks. "You know me too well." "It's true, and that's why I know you'll keep wondering if you could have done something different, if you could have helped Elizabeth somehow, if you could have avoided all this." "And you don't think I could have?" "I think you did exactly what any decent person would have done at every step of the process," Rebecca said firmly. "You were kind when she showed up. You set boundaries when she became invasive. You sought help when she became dangerous. There's nothing you could have done differently." Marcus knew Rebecca was right, but it would take time for him to truly believe it. In the following weeks, Marcus and Rebecca slowly rebuilt their sense of normalcy. They removed all the cameras and surveillance devices Elizabeth had installed, changed the locks at home and at the shop, and gradually relaxed the security precautions that had become second nature. The shop returned to its normal rhythm. The employees stopped asking questions about the mysterious client, and the neighbors stopped commenting on the police cars that had become frequent in the area. Marcus received occasional updates about Elizabeth through the police. She had been admitted to a mental health facility for intensive treatment and was responding well to medication. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her recovery, although everyone agreed it would be a long process. "She asked to send you a letter," said the detective during one of his follow-up visits. "A letter," Marcus repeated. "A letter of apology. She wrote it as part of her therapy. You're under no obligation to read it, but her doctors think it would be beneficial for her healing process to know it was delivered." Marcus picked up the letter and kept it in his desk drawer at home for a few days before finally deciding to read it. "Marcus," the letter began in careful, controlled handwriting, "I don't expect you to forgive me for what I did. I don't expect you to answer this letter. or to think of me any differently than you probably do now. I'm writing because my therapist said it's important to take full responsibility for my actions. I know now that what I felt for you wasn't love. It was a projection of all my unmet childhood needs, all my fantasies about being saved by someone good. You became a symbol in my mind, not a real person with your own life and choices. I violated your privacy in unforgivable ways. I threatened your family. I tried to control your life to satisfy my own emotional needs. All of that was wrong, and there is no excuse for what I did. I also know now that you really did save me when I was a child. My therapist helped me recover real memories from that day, separate from the fantasies I built around it. You were kind to me when I was scared and lost. That was a gift, and I turned it into something ugly with my obsessions. I am working to become a better person, learning about healthy boundaries, about real love versus obsession, about how to build genuine relationships. It's hard work, but necessary. I hope you and Rebecca can find peace after everything I caused. You deserve a quiet, happy life, free from the disturbances I brought. I will not try to contact you again. This letter is my goodbye. Thank you for showing me kindness so many years ago, and I'm sorry for turning that kindness into something that caused so much fear and pain. Elizabeth Marcus read the letter twice, then showed it to Rebecca. They discussed for a while whether they should respond, but finally decided it would be best to let the contact end there. She sounds different, observed Rebecca. More self-aware. Yes, agreed Marcus. I hope it's real, that she's really getting better. And if it is real, it means it was the right thing to do, said Rebecca. Setting firm boundaries, getting help when she became dangerous. Maybe having to face the consequences of her actions was exactly what she needed to seek real help. Marcus nodded, feeling for the first time since Elizabeth had appeared in his life that perhaps everything had ended in the best way possible, given the circumstances. 6 months later, Marcus was working on a car in the shop when Daniel approached with a strange expression on his face. Marcus, there's a woman here wanting to speak with you. Marcus felt his stomach sink. Could it be Elizabeth? Had she been released from treatment and come back to find him? What woman? Asked Marcus, trying to keep his voice calm. An older woman, maybe in her 60s, said her name is Mary Thompson and that you saved her when she was a child. Marcus was confused. The name meant nothing to him, and he had never known a Mary Thompson. Where is she? In the office, waiting. Marcus wiped his hands and went to the office, where he found a woman with graying hair and a gentle smile sitting patiently in the visitor's chair. She stood up when she saw him enter. Mr. Marcus Thompson, she asked. That's me. My name is Mary Thompson. No relation, just a coincidence of the last name, she said with a smile. I am that girl you really saved 29 years ago. Marcus looked at her more closely and felt a wave of recognition. There was something familiar about her eyes, the way she smiled. The girl from Palm Street? Asked Marcus. Exactly, confirmed Mary. 8 years old, lost, crying, with an injury on her right arm from falling off her bike. Marcus sat down heavily in the chair behind the desk. After everything that had happened with Elizabeth, finding the real girl he had saved seemed surreal. How did you find me? Asked Marcus. I read about what happened to that woman in the newspapers, explained Mary. When I saw someone was pretending to be the girl you saved, I knew I had to come talk to you. Why did it take you so long to look for me? Mary smiled. Because I never felt the need, she said simply. You helped me that day. My parents found me, and we moved on with our lives. It was a beautiful moment, but it was just that. A moment. The simplicity of Mary's answer made Marcus realize how different her perspective was from Elizabeth's. For Mary, that day had been important, but not defining. For Elizabeth, it had become an obsession that consumed decades of her life. What do you do today? Asked Marcus, genuinely curious. I'm a retired teacher, said Mary. Married for 35 years, 3 children, 5 grandchildren, a common and happy life. And that day, how do you remember it? Mary thought for a moment. I remember being very scared and hurt. I remember a kind boy who helped me clean the cut on my arm and stayed with me until my parents found me. I remember feeling safe when you were there. Did it have a big impact on your life?" "It had a positive impact, yes," said Mary. "It showed me that there are good people in the world who help others without expecting anything in return. That influenced how I raised my children and how I treated my students over the years." "But you never felt obsessed with that day or with finding me again?" Mary seemed confused by the question. "Why would I feel obsessed?" she asked. "You did a good deed, I was grateful, and we moved on with our lives. Isn't that how these things are supposed to work?" Marcus laughed, realizing how Mary's normal, healthy response contrasted dramatically with Elizabeth's unhealthy obsession. "Yes," said Marcus, "that's exactly how it should work." Mary stayed at the shop for an hour, talking with Marcus about their lives, their families, their careers. It was a pleasant and natural conversation, the kind of conversation Marcus had hoped to have with Elizabeth, but never could. "Marcus," said Mary, as she prepared to leave, "I want you to know that what you did for me that day was special, even if it was just a moment. Simple, spontaneous kindness like that is rare, and it made a difference in the life of a scared child." "Thank you," said Marcus, "and thank you for coming to tell me how your life turned out. I always wondered what happened to that girl." "And now you know," smiled Mary. "She grew up, had a good life, and still remembers fondly the kind boy who helped her when she needed it." After Mary left, Marcus sat in the office for a long time, reflecting on the difference between the two women who had appeared in his life, claiming to be the same child. Elizabeth had turned a moment of kindness into a destructive obsession that almost ruined several lives. Mary had turned the same moment into a lesson about human kindness that positively influenced her for decades. The difference wasn't in what had happened that day 29 years ago. The difference was in the mental and emotional health of the two women, in how they processed and integrated the experience into their lives. When Marcus got home that night, he told Rebecca about Mary's visit. "How do you feel about it?" asked Rebecca. "Relieved," said Marcus, "and grateful. Relieved to finally know the true story of what happened that day. And I'm grateful to see that my small act of kindness truly made a positive difference in someone's life. In the right way." "And how does that change how you feel about Elizabeth?" Marcus thought for a moment. "It makes me have even more compassion for her," he said eventually, "because now I see that she could have had the same healthy response that Mary had. The fact that she didn't shows how deep her emotional problems were." "Do you still blame yourself for what happened?" "No," said Marcus, and realized it was true. Seeing how Mary reacted to the same event, it's clear the problem was never what I did or didn't do. The problem was Elizabeth's mental illness. Rebecca took her husband's hand. "I'm proud of you," she said, "for how you handled all of this, for keeping your compassion even when you were scared, for not giving up on believing in people's kindness despite everything that happened." Marcus smiled, feeling for the first time in months that he had truly put the episode with Elizabeth behind him. A year later, Marcus received one last communication related to Elizabeth. It was a letter from the psychiatric hospital where she was being treated, informing him that Elizabeth had been deemed suitable for gradual reintegration into society. "Patient Elizabeth Harrison has successfully completed our intensive treatment program," the letter said. "She has demonstrated significant understanding of her past behaviors and has developed healthy coping strategies to manage her obsessive tendencies. As part of her reintegration program, she is being transferred to a transitional care facility where she will receive ongoing supervision as she rebuilds her independence. Ms. Harrison specifically requested we inform you that she fully understands the no-contact boundaries established with your family and has no intention of violating them. She also expressed hope that you may find peace, knowing she is actively working to become a healthier person." Marcus folded the letter and put it away with Elizabeth's earlier apology letter. He didn't know if he would ever want to reread those letters, but for now he was content knowing they existed as evidence that even the most difficult situations could have redemptive endings. "How do you feel about her being released?" asked Rebecca. "Hopeful," said Marcus. "Hopeful that she has truly found the healing she needed and that she can build a healthy, happy life for herself. What if she tries to contact us again? Then we'll deal with it if it happens, said Marcus, but something tells me it won't. The letter she wrote before sounded genuine, and this update suggests she really has changed. Rebecca nodded, but Marcus could see she still had reservations, and he couldn't blame her. After all they'd been through, it was natural to be cautious. But the months passed, and there was no sign of Elizabeth. Marcus occasionally wondered how she was, where she was living, what kind of work she was doing. But they were compassionate thoughts, not obsessive, the kind of curiosity one might have about anyone who had been through a crisis and was trying to recover. Marcus and Rebecca's life gradually returned not just to normal, but to something better than normal. The experience with Elizabeth had tested their relationship and their mutual trust, and they had come out stronger on the other side. They installed better security systems at home and at the workshop, not because of ongoing fear, but because they had learned the value of sensible precautions. They became more deliberate about sharing personal information with acquaintances, but not paranoid. Most importantly, they developed a deeper appreciation for the simple, quiet life they had built together. Elizabeth's offers of money and business opportunities had seemed tempting at the time, but experience had taught Marcus that there was nothing more valuable than peace of mind and healthy relationships. The shop continued to prosper in a modest and organic way. Marcus never expanded into the kind of operation Elizabeth had proposed, but he gradually modernized the equipment and eventually hired 2 more employees. The growth was slow and sustainable, based on reputation and quality of work, not on outside investment or aggressive marketing. Marcus also began doing volunteer work with at-risk youth in the community, teaching basic mechanical skills as a way to give them career options. It was a way to positively channel the lesson he had learned about how small acts of kindness could truly change lives, when done the right way, for receptive people at the right time. "Don't you ever regret not accepting Elizabeth's offers?" Rebecca asked one evening, as they sat in their small backyard, enjoying the quiet of a peaceful night. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I wonder how it would have been," he admitted. "But when I think about what would have come with those benefits, the control, the manipulation, the loss of my autonomy, I know we made the right choice. What if she had been a different person? If she had made the offer without all the emotional baggage? Then maybe I would have considered it," said Marcus. "But in that case, she would have been a different person making different offers for different reasons. The point is, Elizabeth's offers were never really about business or opportunity. They were about control and possession." Rebecca nodded, understanding what he was saying. "Do you think you'll hear from her again someday?" "Honestly?" "I hope not," said Marcus. "Not because I'm angry or resentful, but because if she has truly healed, she'll understand that the best gift she can give me is to leave me in peace. And if you do hear from her, then I'll hope it's something positive, maybe an update on how her life is going well, shared through an intermediary like her therapist. Something that lets me know she's okay without reopening a dynamic that isn't healthy for either of us." It was a mature and compassionate answer, and Rebecca felt proud of how her husband had processed and grown from the experience. 5 years passed, with no further communication from or about Elizabeth. Marcus occasionally thought of her, especially when he read news about mental health or when he met others who had been through similar experiences with stalking. But the thoughts were distant and impersonal, like one might think about a character in a book they read long ago. The shop had expanded to a second location in the neighboring district, and Marcus was considering eventually passing more responsibilities to Daniel and other senior employees. Rebecca had been promoted to assistant principal at her school, and they were talking about retirement plans for 10 years down the line. They were conversations they never could have had if they had accepted Elizabeth's offers and become entangled in her business schemes. Their simple, self-determined life had proven more valuable than any external wealth could have been. It was during this period of quiet contentment that Marcus received one last surprise related to the episode with Elizabeth. He was reading the local newspaper on Sunday morning when he saw a small article in the community news section. The headline was "Former Executive Opens Treatment Center for Obsessive Disorders." Marcus read the article with growing interest. Elizabeth had used part of her fortune to open a treatment center specializing in obsessive-compulsive disorders and relational obsessive behaviors. The center offered free or low-cost therapy for people who could not afford private treatment. My own experience with obsessive disorder taught me how important it is to have access to specialized care, Elizabeth said in the interview, without mentioning specific details of her own situation. Many people suffer in silence because they can't afford proper treatment or because they are ashamed to seek help. The article mentioned that Elizabeth had completed additional training in psychology and was working as a peer counselor at the center, using her own recovery experience to help others. Marcus showed the article to Rebecca. "What do you think about this?" she asked. "I think it's exactly what she should be doing," said Marcus, "turning her painful experience into something that can help other people. Aren't you worried this might be some kind of manipulation, a way to appear changed when she really hasn't?" Marcus considered the possibility. "It's possible," he admitted, "but if it is manipulation, it's not directed at me." The article doesn't even mention why she decided to open the center, and if it's genuine, then it's a wonderful thing. "Would you like to make a donation to the center?" The question took Marcus by surprise. He hadn't considered the possibility. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Part of me would like to support the work they're doing, but another part of me feels that any contact, even indirect, could be misinterpreted." "What if you made an anonymous donation?" Marcus thought about it. An anonymous donation could support the important work without creating any personal connection or opportunity for misunderstanding. "Maybe," he finally said. "Let me think about it." The following week, Marcus made a modest donation to the center through an intermediary, ensuring it could not be traced back to him. It wasn't a large donation. He didn't have Elizabeth's resources, but it was significant enough to sponsor several therapy sessions for someone in need. Making the donation gave him a sense of closure. If Elizabeth had truly changed and was using her experience to help others, then something positive had come out of that whole painful situation. And if she hadn't changed, at least other people would benefit from the center she had created. "How do you feel about it?" asked Rebecca after Marcus made the donation. "Good," said Marcus, "like I've finally closed the circle completely." And it was true. For years, Marcus had carried questions about Elizabeth, whether she was okay, whether she had recovered, whether anything positive could come from that whole traumatic experience. Knowing that she was channeling her experience to help others answered all those questions in a way that gave him peace. Marcus never heard directly from Elizabeth again. The center she had founded continued to operate and expand over the years, gaining recognition as a valuable resource for people with obsessive disorders. Marcus occasionally saw mentions of the center in articles about mental health, but Elizabeth was never mentioned by name in connection with her own story. It was exactly as it should be. Elizabeth had found a way to turn her experience into something useful without using it as a platform for personal attention or to try to re-establish contact with the people she had hurt. 10 years after the first meeting with Elizabeth, Marcus was preparing to retire from the shop. Daniel had agreed to buy the business, and Marcus was confident he was leaving the shop in good hands. While organizing his personal files, Marcus found the 2 letters Elizabeth had written, the apology letter from the hospital and the update about her release. He read them again for the first time in years. "Are you going to keep these?" asked Rebecca. Marcus thought for a moment. "No," he finally said. "I think it's time to let them go." He burned the letters in the backyard that night, not out of anger or resentment, but as a symbolic act of release. The lessons he had learned from the experience would stay with him, but he no longer needed the physical reminders of the most difficult period of his life. As he watched the letters turn to ashes, Marcus reflected on everything he had learned. He had learned about the dangers of confusing gratitude with obsession, about the importance of setting boundaries even with people who seemed grateful, and about how small acts of kindness could be twisted by sick minds. But he had also learned about the resilience of healthy relationships, about the value of a simple autonomous life, and about how even the most difficult experiences could lead to growth and wisdom. Most importantly, he had learned that his fundamental kindness did not need to be sacrificed because of one bad experience. The meeting with Mary, the real girl he had saved, had confirmed that his instincts about helping others were correct. The problem had never been his act of kindness. The problem had been Elizabeth's sick response to that act. "Do you regret helping that girl all those years ago?" asked Rebecca, watching him burn the letters. "Never," said Marcus without hesitation. "If I hadn't helped, Mary might have been lost longer. She might have gotten hurt. And even in Elizabeth's case, if my act of kindness eventually led her to seek help and find healing, then it was worth it. Even with all the trauma she caused." "The trauma was a result of her illness, not my act of kindness," said Marcus. "I can't let one person's sick response stop me from continuing to be kind to others." It was a perspective that had taken years to develop, but now felt solid and immovable. Marcus had learned to be more careful, more alert to warning signs, more willing to set boundaries when needed. But he had not become cynical or closed off. In the retirement years that followed, Marcus continued his volunteer work with at-risk youth, expanding it to include a formal mentorship program. He and Rebecca traveled modestly, visited family, and enjoyed the quiet life they had built together. Marcus never again encountered anyone like Elizabeth, someone whose gratitude turned into dangerous obsession. But he found many people like Mary, people who were positively touched by small acts of kindness and who passed that positivity forward in their own lives. And that, Marcus realized, was what made the risk of being kind worth taking. For every Elizabeth who might twist an act of kindness into something destructive, there were dozens of Marys who would turn that same act into a positive force in their lives and the lives of others. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this moving story. Were you able to feel the tension and the twists that involved Marcus and Elizabeth? Did Elizabeth's final transformation into someone who uses her experience to help others touch your heart? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. Do you believe people can really change and find redemption after such extreme situations? I would love to read your thoughts on this journey of obsession, fear, but also hope and renewal. Thank you so much for your company during this story. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other thrilling narratives like this one.